This is an overview of Hidden Wild Lesson 2 that can be utilized in the middle school 7th grade content area that would review limiting factors. There is a lesson plan and there are worksheets that can go along with the lesson that can either be printed or can be utilized digitally throughout Google Classroom. The lesson objectives that would be utilized going through the whole 5E process would be to recognize that certain environmental factors limit the size of a population, explaining how food, shelter, space, nesting sites, water, disease, parasitism, and predation have each an impact on a population, describing the limiting factors in Florida's land, freshwater, and marine ecosystems and their effect on native populations, describing how scientific explanations may change as new observations are made and new evidence is discovered, and explaining how the study of invasive and non-native species has led to developing policies to reduce harmful impacts. The first thing that you would start off with in the classroom is the engage, which is going to be an anticipation guide. The anticipation guide has 3 statements that basically would be outlined throughout the video. The video is going to be used in the engage portion, but would be shown after this anticipation guide. There is another column that is not viewed currently on the screen, and that is done after 2 sections of the 5E model. After you have given the class time to go through the engage portion of the anticipation guide, you are now going to build a class consensus. In that class consensus, you can do it a handful of different ways. You can go ahead and do it digitally through platforms like Poll Everywhere. You can do it using a Jamboard, or you can go ahead and do it physically, whether you're using a sticky bar activity, which is displayed on the screen in front of you, or you could even have the students do a walk the line or cross the classroom type activity for each agree and disagree. And it's just to kind of get a feel of where everybody is before starting off. Nobody's going over any answers. No one's having any kind of discussion. It's just kind of seeing where everybody lies. After you finish that portion, you are now going to get into the video. In the video, there is a portion at the bottom of the worksheet that allows the students to write in their video thoughts as they are watching. So as they watch section 2 of Hidden Wild, they would write down their thoughts, any kind of reactions that they're having while watching the students explore, any impacts to what they're seeing, and any questions that they may have. Then you would show the video for Hidden Wild. And then after you have finished the Hidden Wild video, you can recap with the students of what was discussed on the bottom of the anticipation guide before moving on. Then on day 2, the expected outcome would be getting hands-on with limiting factors in an ecosystem by building a scientific model or using a scientific model. There are 2 ways to conduct this. There is a physical and then there is a digital version of this. You would not have to do both versions of the model. You would just need to pick whichever one you are most comfortable with. Before starting the actual activity, there is a previewing activity that goes over limiting factors. After you finish going through the limiting factors video, just go ahead and do a quick little class recap to make sure everybody understands limiting factors before you proceed. The first activity up is the digital version. The digital version is a tuna population simulation activity. So it does give them a computer model versus a physical model. There are 4 different stages, meaning there are 4 different activities they would do individually of each other. So they would run the simulation with stage 1 with just manipulating the reproduction, migration information. And then stage 2, they would be manipulating predators and food. Stage 3, they're going to be manipulating seasons. And then stage 4, they're manipulating a handful of what was just given to them throughout stage 1, 2, and 3. The way that they're going to manipulate is identically model what is given to them on their lab sheet, which is at the top of the worksheet. and then they can write down the information at the bottom as far as what the graph is showing. There are 2 analysis questions at the bottom of the worksheet that go with the top portion to make sure that they actually understood and got a grasp of the full activity. After you have reviewed those analysis activity questions with the students, there are additional questions that you could ask the students, given there are time. That is reflected in the lesson plan as well as the slide notes at the bottom. For the physical activity, this is a wolf lab. So the students would be divided into 2 sections, the wolf line and the component line. They would be given cards, things like food, like water, any of the limiting factors, and they would go ahead and line up in the 2 lines, and somebody would take a bucket and they would go down the wolf line and give them the red cards so they could pick out each of those different type of limiting factors randomly. Same thing with a component line. They had the same type of factors, and they would pick those same ones out, and then you would let them find their matches. So that would be when the wolves would go towards the component line. Okay, the wolves would be your predator, so they're going towards that predation category. So once the wolves find their match, they would bring them back to the wolf line once they do, and then you would count out how many students are left for that round, and they would put that information for the round line for the number of students. Cards get collected, the red ones go back into the red bucket, green ones back to the green bucket, mix them all up, and then you would do the same thing over and over again until you've completed 10 full rounds. Once that is completed, the students would have analysis questions at the bottom of their worksheet as well. Again, once that is completed by the students, there are further review questions, discussion questions that you could go over with the students after the analysis has been discussed and there's been a debrief on this lab activity. And again, those questions are in the speaker notes of the slide and also reflected in the lesson plan. Then you would go to day 3. Day 3 would be making further connections of what we've already been going through. So this is giving them a time to self-engage in the activity by doing a jigsaw activity. So for Jigsaw, you would go ahead and divide the students up into different groups with 3 students per group, giving them each number, a 1, a 2, or a 3. All the ones would be responsible for completing only task question number 1. Students with 2s would be given only task 2. Students that were given number 3 would be only researching and understanding task 3. So individually in their normal table groups or home groups or wherever they're sitting, they would go ahead and answer their specific question. The information for how they can answer it would be posted in Google Classroom or given to them ahead of you starting the timer for this activity. Once they have answered their question and the timer goes off, they are now going to go to an expert group. So in their expert group, they are now going to meet with students that had like numbers with them. So all the 1s are now going to come together. 2s come together. All the 3s come together. And they're going to discuss their task question and the answer that they put down. They can agree to disagree on some things. They can add new information into things. This is a time to make sure everybody is on the same page, not that every single person has the same identical answer. Then they're going to go back to their home groups, and they are going to be the teacher. So once they get into that, you would go ahead and allow each member 4 minutes to go over their information, starting with number 1, then moving to number 2, and then moving to number 3. While number 1s are giving their information and teaching the other 2 group members, the other 2 group members would be writing down notes for task question number 1, so they would have an answer, not copying the person who is giving them the information, but writing down their own interpretation of that answer and asking questions if they need further clarifications. Same thing goes for 2, same thing goes for 3s. Then after you finish this jigsaw activity and you've debriefed to make sure everyone's good on this, you would be moving back to the original anticipation guide from day 1. And then you would be going through the after column. Okay, so you're going to go back through your answers, read each statement with the students, whether they agreed with it and it's a disagree answer, you can have them leave their original answer and use a different method to note the new answer, or they can erase it or cross it out. However, you decide that you would like the students to have that information there. But this is when you would go over the information as far as the agree, disagree. And then whether the student was right or wrong, they are writing in the after column. So if they were right, what prior knowledge gave them clues to picking the agree or the disagree, whichever was the right answer? If they were wrong, what new information have they now currently learned to lead them to understand that that statement is either an agree or disagree statement? Then moving on to day 4. Day 4 is understanding why prescribed fire is necessary. So for the elaborate, you can keep them in their same groups of 3 that you did for Jigsaw, or you can go ahead and mix them up and put them in groups of 3s to 4 students, and they will keep this group for the elaborate and for the evaluate portions. So they're going to work together for the Fueling the Flames worksheet, which has 3 different areas of answers that would need to be given. And there is a thing link that is QR coded at the top of the worksheet page to help them answer these questions. They are not limited to using the links that are on the thing link. These are guides, so if they have further questions while they're doing their research and they would like to open up another reputable source, then I would welcome that as well. Once you have gone over and reviewed the information for the Fueling the Fire, you have additional discussion questions that you can also ask with the students. Then the last portion is the evaluate. On the evaluate, depending on the class structure, you could either, or depending on the student levels, you could get this done in about 3 days, or it could be more than 3 days, which is why there's a plus sign up here. So it kind of is up to your class time and the leveling of your students. So this is bringing everything full circle that they have learned. So they would utilize every single resource that they currently already had. So they would have their anticipation guide, they would have their lab information, they would have the Jigsaw paper, and then they would have the Fueling the Fire paper. So they have all those resources at their disposal to now create a educating and mitigating the community slideshow. So they can do this slideshow where they are presenting it to the class, or they can also do this slideshow where once they create their presentation, they then divulge it onto Flipgrid. So that would be up to the discretion of the teacher as well. So the prescribed fire has a scenario. So the scenario is that your Environmental Resources Management Agency is receiving many complaints about the upcoming controlled burn from concerned citizens of a homeowners association near Cypress Creek North Natural Area. This is one of the natural areas that has had many complaints, and this is one of the ones that is closest to the video area from lesson 2. So they need to then create a presentation that helps to not only explain to citizens why this is necessary, but to actually educate them as well. So this is an HOA that has 4 major complaints, which will be on the next slide. Their presentation needs to educate about the benefits and why it's actually necessary. It should also address the complaints for each one of the 4 different complaints and solutions. And it needs to show that they have a thoughtful and thorough understanding, not just copying and pasting from websites. The 4 complaints, which are the 4 most common complaint categories that PBC-ERM does get, is ash covering different pieces of property, whether it's covering people's patios, whether it's covering their cars, covering their furniture. This one is in this case covering car. So this is one of those things where this is very realistic as to what really happens. The second one is the asthma. So the scenario has a son that has asthma, and the smoke is so thick in the air, they have to actually keep this child inside all day, which could mean that they're missing school. The third one is the child comes home upset after seeing the fire in the distance and kept talking about how they thought all the animals were dying in the fire. And then the fourth one is somebody saying how they're living in a really nice community and they pay a lot of HOA dues for their property, and it's very unappealing to now see a scorched area that has black char and no more trees in that area. So hopefully the students by the end of this will have a complete understanding and be able to then communicate that information to everybody. How you decide as the teacher to have them portray it, doing it as a class presentation or doing it through Flipgrid, is completely up to you. If you do it through Flipgrid, you do have the ability to have students then do constructive criticism, not necessarily grading the student or giving feedback as far as what a teacher would do, but giving them a wonder statement and a wow statement. Wow, this was awesome because I really like how you incorporated this, or I never thought of that. And a constructive criticism of, I wonder why you didn't include this, or I wonder if you knew that, type of thing. You could do the same thing with a whole group class presentation, have them turn it in on paper, pencil, do it through Google Classroom, Google Forms, however you want to do that as well. I hope this helps understand Lesson 2 for Hidden Wild, and I hope that if you have any questions that you will reach out to Secondary Science. Thank you.